No one expected it. When Donald Trump walked into the historic Naval Academy Hall in Maryland, the atmosphere instantly shifted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The faint shuffle of shoes against polished floors faded into silence. Rows of midshipmen in crisp white uniforms stood tall and still, their posture sharp, their expressions disciplined. Medals and insignia gleamed under the bright overhead lights. The air itself felt formal, heavy with tradition, sacrifice, and generations of service etched into the walls. This wasn't a campaign rally. It wasn't a television debate. There were no cheering crowds, no oversized banners, no roaring applause waiting on cue. This was different. This was a room filled with future naval officers, young men and women who had chosen early mornings over comfort, discipline over distraction, and service over spotlight. Every uniform represented years of preparation and a promise to protect something larger than personal ambition. Trump stepped forward toward the podium as the faint echo of his shoes carried across the hall. Cameras were present, positioned carefully along the sides, but this event wasn't designed for spectacle. It was meant to be structured, respectful, predictable. A formal address. A speech about leadership. About strength. About the future of the United States military. His prepared remarks rested neatly in a folder. The teleprompter glowed softly nearby. Everything was set exactly as planned. The crowd waited for bold statements, for strong declarations, for familiar themes delivered with confidence. They expected a traditional message, polished and precise. But as Trump looked out across the sea of white uniforms, something in his expression changed. And in that quiet pause, before a single unexpected word was spoken, the entire tone of the room began to shift. They were not prepared for what happened next. Trump began speaking about commitment and sacrifice. His voice carried clearly across the hall, steady and deliberate. He spoke about the long history of the Naval Academy, about young men and women who had once sat in those very seats before going on to serve in wars, humanitarian missions, and moments of crisis around the world. He talked about courage under pressure, about discipline when no one is watching, about the responsibility that comes with wearing the uniform. The midshipmen listened in silence, eyes forward, posture locked. Everything felt exactly as expected. Then he stopped, mid-sentence. He looked out across the rows of white uniforms, scanning the faces in front of him. For a brief moment, he said nothing at all. Then he did something unusual. He stepped away from the podium. A slight murmur moved through the room. It wasn't loud, just a ripple of surprise. That wasn't part of the schedule. The teleprompter continued glowing behind him, untouched. A few staff members exchanged quick glances. Instead of continuing his prepared remarks, Trump walked down the steps and into the aisle between the cadets. The sound of his shoes echoed softly against the polished floor. Secret Service agents shifted their stance subtly, but allowed him space. He stopped near the second row and pointed toward a young midshipman. "What's your name?" he asked. The young man stood instantly, spine straight. "Midshipman Carter, sir." Trump nodded once. "Why did you choose this path?" The question hung in the air. It wasn't rehearsed. The answer wasn't scripted. And suddenly, this wasn't a formal address anymore. The tone had shifted completely. This wasn't a speech. It was a conversation. And everyone in that hall knew they were witnessing something unplanned and unforgettable. Midshipman Carter swallowed, clearly surprised that the spotlight had found him. For a split second, his composure flickered not from fear, but from the unexpected nature of the moment. "Sir," he said, his voice steadying as he continued, "my father served, my grandfather too. I wanted to earn the uniform, not inherit it." The words settled into the room. The hall grew even quieter than before. Even the faint hum of the lights seemed distant. This wasn't a rehearsed patriotic answer. It was personal, honest. Trump studied him carefully, as if measuring the weight of what had just been said. Then he nodded slowly. "That's respect," he replied. "You don't borrow honor, you build it." A few heads turned. Some cadets exchanged quick glances, absorbing the exchange. The statement wasn't loud or dramatic, but it carried meaning. It acknowledged effort over legacy, choice over comfort. Trump continued walking slowly down the aisle, hands loosely at his sides, pausing near a young woman standing 2 rows ahead. Her posture was firm, eyes focused straight ahead. "And you," he asked, "what drives you?" She didn't hesitate. "Service, sir," she answered clearly. "I believe leadership means standing last when others are in danger." The confidence in her voice didn't demand attention, it earned it. Trump paused again, looking at her thoughtfully. Instead of clapping, instead of delivering a polished response, he did something no one anticipated. He thanked them, not as a group, not as a future statistic, not as a headline, but as individuals. He looked each of them in the eye and said simply, "Thank you for choosing this." And in that quiet acknowledgement, something shifted. Respect had moved in both directions. Trump removed the prepared speech pages from his folder and set them aside. "I was going to give you a long speech today," he said, "but I don't think you need one." The room remained still. "You already understand discipline. You already understand sacrifice. What you need," he continued, "is leaders who listen." Then he did something even more unexpected. He invited several midshipmen to join him at the front of the hall and speak about what leadership meant to them. No script, no filters. One spoke about responsibility, another about accountability, another about unity during conflict. Instead of dominating the room, Trump listened. For nearly 20 minutes, the future officers spoke openly about pressure, expectations, and the weight of representing their country. Observers later said that was the moment the energy changed. It wasn't political. It wasn't confrontational. It felt real. After the discussion ended, Trump returned to the podium, but his tone was different now. "You reminded me today," he said, "that the strength of this country isn't in buildings or titles. It's in people willing to serve." There was no dramatic applause line, no sharp closing statement, just a quiet acknowledgement. When he finished, the room stood, not because they were instructed to, but because respect had been exchanged both ways. Clips of the moment spread quickly online. Not because of controversy, not because of outrage, but because viewers noticed something unusual. A leader stepping away from the spotlight to hear the next generation speak. Supporters praised the interaction, critics analyzed it, commentators debated it. But many agreed on one thing. The most unexpected part of the visit was what Trump said. It was that he chose to listen. By the time he exited the hall, the midshipmen had returned to formation. The routine of academy life resumed. Discipline, structure, order. But something about that day felt different. For a brief moment, titles and ranks had stepped aside, and in their place stood a simple exchange between experience and ambition. Whether you agreed with him or not, the visit proved something powerful. Leadership isn't always about commanding a room. Sometimes it's about walking into one and deciding to hear it.